And welcome everyone to today's webinar from Dovetail Learning. We're going to be talking about families and what strengthens resilience. My name is Chuck Fisher. I'm so glad to be here with you. Um, I am the Director of Transformational Learning at Dovetail Learning. I'm a transpersonal psychologist, former school counselor, and former executive director at Dovetail, where we teach resilience to educators, healthcare providers, families, and many others around the world. Um, just a little bit more about me and my family. Um, I love my family, and you can see me here with my wife in the mountains and with my grandkids, and I have extended family I'm very close to, and family is really, when it comes down to it, it's what it's all about. Family and friends, right? So we're going to be talking about family, and I'll share more about my family as we go. Let me first introduce Dovetail, for those of you who don't know who we are and what we do. Dovetail is a nonprofit, and our mission is to strengthen resilience in adults and children. We worked for many years just in the education space, and we were strengthening resilience in children and discovered that, well, through the research, it shows that it's hard for children to get resilience if the adults who are with them don't have it. So we did a pivot, and we've been teaching our resilience work to adults since 2020. And our vision is a world, in this case, a family of kind, connected human beings. Just a little bit more about Dovetail. We are an open education resource, which means that everything that we have is available as a download for free. You can adapt it and use it. You can share it with others, collaborate with us, and share alike according to the license, which is a Creative Commons attribution license recognized worldwide. We love giving our work away, and please visit our website and take a look at a great deal of material, numerous webinars, and resources available to you. What we're really about is being committed to a world that works for everyone. And today we're going to talk about how do we create a family that works for everyone. We'll do that first by just introducing the approach very briefly. It's an involved approach that has many parts, and we'll be looking at a few of those parts today in order to consider how to strengthen our family. We'll look through the lens of awareness and noticing and mindfulness, and what those are and how they apply to noticing ourselves and our family. We'll look at protective patterns, because it's remiss to even consider resilience without looking at the primary things that keep us from being resilient. And then we'll look at a few of the skills to help us be a resilient family, and I'll give you pointers to directions of where to go to find more information at the end. This is billed to be a 30-minute webinar. I'll keep it as close to that as possible. I won't be taking Q&A during the webinar, but if anyone wants to stay on after, happy to speak, dialogue after the webinar is complete. So we are resilient, an intentional approach to well-being. You know, we go along in our lives, and we do the best we can, and we work hard to be a better person. And there's a whole nother dimension of how to draw on skills intentionally and anchor to them so that we have them available to us. And when we do that, we're better for it. So we call this an intentional approach when we work with pediatricians and doctors, nurses, staff. We call our work anticipatory guidance, which is a particular phrase used in the healthcare industry. But what we're looking at is anticipating what do we need for resilience and anticipating that we're going to get thrown off balance and what are the anchors, what are the skills, the practices that can bring us back to center so that we can be the kind of person we want to be with the people we care about the most, our family members. So the resilient approach that we call We Are Resilient includes several parts. And the first part are what we call mindsets, orientations, attitudes, frames of mind that help us be resilient. And those include curiosity, choice, and courage. How do we really lean into being curious and caring in a relationship, in our family? How can we consider what our choices are, the whole continuum of choices? And then how do we use courage, our own force of nature, our passion for caring, to guide our actions and speak authentically, take the steps that we need to take, own what's true for us, and find a way to be with our family that we can guide them in being whole and healthy and honest and together. And we do that through sets of patterns that we teach and 3 sets of skills. The patterns are cultural patterns and protective patterns. We're not going to talk very much about cultural patterns today. It's what we learn intergenerationally from our family, our ancestors, our beliefs, our attitudes. They're very important. And I urge you, invite you to look on our website and download some of our material or watch some webinars about that specifically because it is so important. We will look at the protective patterns briefly. It's our reactive patterns, what gets in our way mostly. And then we'll look at, we'll spotlight some of the skills, one of the centering skills, one of the connecting skills, and one of the collaborating skills. Each that I picked out just for this, this webinar, this conversation, this exploration on what impacts family, what helps us to center ourselves, how do we connect authentically, what's a basic skill for that, and how do we collaborate together to have the family that we want. So we've been talking a lot about resilience. Let me pull up our favorite definition. This is from Ann Maston, a psychologist at the University of Minnesota. And she says, resilience is an ordinary superpower. It doesn't come from rare and special qualities, but from the everyday magic of being human. And you know, if you consider it, you're resilient every day. I'm resilient every day. I get up, something happens, throws me off center a little bit. I come back, I take a breath, I take a walk outside. You have a difficult conversation that throws you off balance. You find your way through it and you re-engage. You know, we just do this naturally. It's part of how we are. It's how we live, how we get along. And yet, what I talked about in the beginning about being intentional, anticipating, and finding those resilience factors, skills, practices that really make a difference, that make the difference in our families. Being skillful. So let's look at what that is related to families and strengthening resilience in our family, for our family, with our family. And it starts with noticing. Noticing what we notice. And I want to define that a little bit. Noticing is such a powerful spotlight of consciousness that we can use. And sometimes it gets cloudy and we stop noticing, or we pretend that we aren't noticing. And noticing is basically awareness. So I'm going to use these words interchangeably, noticing and awareness. Noticing and mindfulness, non-judgmental state of open awareness, and a word that comes from MIT work that they do in the Presencing Institute called presencing, which is a heightened state of sensory awareness and receptivity to what's in us and what's outside of us, the inner and the outer together. So we're going to use those to look at first ourselves. And we have a motto called going first, which is if we want our family to be resilient, then we need to go first. We need to look at ourselves. We need to notice ourselves and be aware and be mindful. How is my own felt sense of well-being in my family, generally today in this moment, whatever whatever kind of situation that I'm in. And we need to notice our family members. It helps to notice our family members and to think about and observe and be with how my kids are, how my partner or spouse is doing. And then also our family dynamics, the interactions between and among us. So we've got self, other, and group. Those are the three parts of what we explore in this particular approach. We call it personal resilience, relational resilience, and group resilience. So there's three aspects that are all working together at all times in any family. And it starts with noticing ourselves. So noticing ourselves is one of the skills, one of the centering skills. We got to catch ourselves where we are, stop, pause, say, oh, I'm off center, or oh, I'm getting angry, or oh, I need a boundary here. And we use the phrase, pause, what's the cause? Just pause and take a breath and notice our state of being. So we love to walk our talk at Dovetail, and I want to do a very brief experiential practice. We'll breathe mindfully just for a minute or less and notice what we notice. And I'm going to ring this Tibetan bell here just to begin the noticing process. Invite you to go inside, and I'll say a few words about accessing the breath, and then we'll see what we see. So if you'll join me, find your center, find your orientation, find your sits bones, and let the bell just allow you to go internally. And take a breath and just notice that you're breathing. Let your full awareness, your mindfulness go to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, however it is occurring. Just follow the flow of your breath, and then bring all of your attention to the sensation inside your body of the breath as it breathes you. Sensation in the nostrils, in the lungs. Sensations in the belly as the belly rises and falls. And just take stock. How are you doing in this moment? And take a big cleansing breath. And on the bell, open your eyes and come back to center. Feel free to use the chat if you'd like to chat in whatever you're noticing. It could be a word or a phrase. Could be something that's happening in your life. But noticing, pausing, being with our breath is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And it allows us to come into this place where we can presence what's happening. We're presencing first in ourselves. So in my family, I might be presencing dysregulation in myself. I might be presencing a distancing with one of my children or my spouse. Something happened. We haven't figured it out. We haven't concluded it. We haven't found our way through. Noticing what it feels like to walk out into the kitchen in the morning with the rest of the family, or to come home at night after work and to be there. Who's on a device? Who's greeting you? Who's not? What are the dynamics? And how do I show up in all of that? How do I show up in all of that? Noticing myself. And secondly, then noticing the rest of the family. I've got some pictures of kids and teenager here. Noticing you gives me a clue. What am I sensing about their state of being? Their facial muscles, tone of voice, their shoulders, their body posture, their behavior, whether they're present and engaged or isolating and avoiding. How do we experience each person in our family? And what do we notice in ourselves about that? So there's this dual awareness now. We're noticing them, we're noticing how that impacts us when we notice them. And this opens the way to being able to be mindful and to choose what we need to do next. So we've gone from self to other, and then we notice the entire family dynamics. What are the interactions between people? Are my kids having a difficulty? Is my spouse having a difficulty? How is everybody doing? When we see you, me, and the we all together, it's just amazing how much goes on in a family and all of the dynamics between us. So as I notice my family, as I work on this skill in myself of letting it all in, there's all of the kinds of words that might come to mind of what we see, that we're curious about, or that we notice is loving or present or apart, or maybe we're feeling some overwhelm, or one of our children are feeling overwhelmed in their own social or school situation. Are there conflicts? Is there disconnection? Are we happy to be together? And when does that occur? When do we get stressed? And what are we grateful for? All of these pieces lend more awareness to the emotional milieu, if you will. Are we feeling and sensing the emotional connection and disconnection that's going on in our family? And what does that look like? Here's a bunch of pictures just to invoke the kinds of things that we see every day between people who are getting along, having a meal, having a difficulty, in an argument, the stuff of life that is made up of the people in our families and who we are and how we are. every day. And I like to call this the human condition, because every member of our family has impeccable reasons for being exactly who they are, how they are, the emotions that they're expressing, the attitudes that they have. They've inherited them, they've built patterns around them, and they're often based on what we call protective patterns. And when we start noticing the protective patterns and how they show up, we can gain a great deal of empathy and compassion and clarity about what's going on in our family. And all human beings have all of these patterns. Being distrusting and hypervigilant or hyper caretaking of another person, or avoiding being with someone or doing something, or getting defensive, or being aggressive and attacking. And we'll just look at these briefly. We've got distrusting, which is doubting myself or others. Hypervigilant, am I on alert? These are both things that I grew up with because I grew up in an alcoholic family, and I had learned to be distrusting. It helped me to be distrusting. It helped me to be hypervigilant. And of course, when we do that too much, it gets in the way. The next two are hyper caretaking and avoiding. So, two ends of the spectrum. Over caretaking is I'm over prioritizing others at my own expense. Parents will often do this. Sometimes kids will do this. I have a granddaughter who's taken on hyper caretaking. Her parents are away a lot, and she's taken on this role of just taking care of everything. And we do that at our own expense. I mean, caretaking is great. It's good to be helpful. We all want to be helpful. We're contributing. All the family members want to contribute and they want to be helpful. But we can do it at our own expense. And sometimes when we over caretake, then we need to step away and we may avoid things. So we withdraw, or we retreat. Withdrawing and retreating is useful. If something happens between me and my wife, I may need to leave the room, take a walk, get a little time and space. Avoiding. It's a pattern that I know well, and when we see it, we can call it out, then we can choose. I want to have that conversation. It may even be a difficult conversation, but I want to have it, and I want to get curious. And then the last two are defending and attacking. Are some of your family members doing these things? We each have one or two of these that are rote defaults. I'm a defender. Again, I learned how to do that to stay safe in my family, and I always felt criticized and judged. There's a whole healing process that goes along with that, and it goes in conjunction with people who we call our attacking behavior. At Dovetail in the office, everybody's defined their primary behaviors, and we've got defenders and avoiders and attackers and over caretakers, and it's quite revealing and freeing to notice how we are. Am I quick to be on the offensive? Am I more aggressive than I may need to be? And how do all these things play out in the family system between people? And we can notice that, be with it, have empathy and compassion for these default reactive patterns that every human has, and notice how our stress reactions impact how we are together. So a couple of slides on our stress reactions. There's a stressful event, we'll have a reaction. We go into our protective pattern. That's our emotional reactive pattern. That'll peak out, it'll eventually calm down, we'll deplete after. It's called losing our cool. But we have skills and resources and practices available to us. And like Ann Maston said, it's the normal stuff of life. Something happens, we have a reaction, we take care of it, we make it better. And when we draw on noticing our protective patterns and choosing resilient skills, it helps us do that faster. So anyone, all of us, many people use the dovetail resilience skills this way. And we've taught families and family caregivers and family practitioners and therapists around the United States in this work, and they use it with their clients. So one of the beautiful things about having skills and skillfulness is it gets to the place where we can then have a conversation. And having a conversation is critical to family well-being, to resilience, and coming together again after a stressful situation or a difficulty. Gabor Mate, very famous doctor who studies and teaches about trauma, says that being cut off from our own natural self-compassion is one of the greatest impairments we can suffer. That happened for me growing up. Probably not going to go into great detail about my story, but school didn't work for me. I had terrible self-esteem, very difficult inner critic that kept me down, and it was because of trauma that I'd experienced growing up. And what Gabor Mate shows and demonstrates in his work is that if I, as a child, had had a chance to talk about with someone safe the things that I went through, they wouldn't have become the trauma that they became, because it's talking about it, it's being cut off that we suffer from. So we go into the skills for resilience. A lot of that is about communication. And we have skills, as I showed in the beginning, for centering, connecting, and collaborating, what we call personal resilience, relational resilience, and group resilience. We will take a look at 3 of these skills fairly briefly, and I see that I'm going slow on my timing. So if you have to jump off, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar to everyone who has signed up for it. And first thing that we're going to look at is the centering skills, and the centering skill of breathing mindfully, which we started with. And I just want to show you a little bit about how that actually works. So as you experienced in the beginning, when we pause and stop long enough, even 10 seconds can do it. But I think we did about 30 at the beginning of the webinar. It allows us to pause from the outer world and come and take stock of our inner world. And our inner world self-regulates automatically when we use the breath. You can see that in this wonderful graphic. This is a medical illustration of the vagus nerve, which completely envelops the brain, comes down and completely envelops the heart, and it goes all the way through the intestines and in the lower gut. And this mind-body connection is critical to our own self-regulation. So if I'm a little bit off and all I do is start noticing my breath, I take my breath in, I put my hand on my chest and a hand on my belly, and I just go in for a moment and catch the wave, the sensation, bringing awareness and mindfulness and presence to what's happening here in my body. I'm getting somatic information. And what we know from the research on the neurocardiology of the heart and the psychoneuroimmunology, it also impacts our immune system when we come into our breath, is that our head, our heart, and our gut can start working in sync. And the way that works is the heart literally starts beating in harmony with itself. When we're in freeze, fight, flight mode, our heart is beating against itself. out of sync. And when we begin to take those have awareness of our respiration, and we begin to take breaths, our heart starts to go into synchronization, as measured with the space between the heartbeats. And I'm not going to go into the science of it here because we have very little time. But the point of this whole thing is that when we take a breath, it impacts our entire nervous system. And that matters because we matter to our family. How we are matters to how our family is, how our children is, how our spouse is. And we like to use the phrase being causing the matter. We have this circular graphic here called practice model coach. When we practice, we go first. We get off balance. We bring ourselves onto balance. We shift from being upset to being cool or calmer and more collected. And our inner music impacts everything and everyone else in the family. So we are causing the matter. Noticing ourselves first, bringing skillfulness to our own self-regulation first is the most powerful thing we can do to have solid, resilient relationships with everyone in the family. And I'll just show you the theory behind this in The Power of Modeling. This comes from modeling theory. There's 3 types of model. There's a dysfunctional model. If we're off balance, we're reactive, we're feeling like a victim of how our kids are treating us or our spouse is treating us, it limits us, and others can't learn from us very well when we're in that place. Our kids can't learn from us. They just see us being dysfunctional. The other end of the spectrum is called the perfect model. Now, if I hold it all together and I don't show any emotion, if I pretend like everything's fine when it's not, I'm in a mode of perfection, being controlled. It's inauthentic. I'm actually more fragile from that, and I'm acting like I have it all together. Now, my kids can't learn very much from me in that role because they don't see me managing myself. They think they have to be perfect. They think they're not okay if they're not like me. So in modeling theory, the growth model is the model that we learn from. Being vulnerable, transparent, authentic, and strong. I'm learning, and as parents who step into the growth model can have the vulnerability to say, oh, that really hurt my feelings when you talk to me that way, or oh, I'm feeling really off and I need to step outside and catch my breath. Being transparent in all the leadership literature and work that's being done from Harvard through all schools of life. Vulnerability and transparency is one of the two of the strongest leadership qualities. And make no mistake about it, as parents, we are leaders in our families. And so using this understanding of modeling and modeling theory, we can move towards the growth model so that we can be more transparent and also be authentic and strong. And we can do that using more of the skills. So I'm going to highlight in this case for connecting the skill of heartfelt listening. Heartfelt listening. You know, I shared a quote from Gabor Mate that said, when we're not listened to, that's one of the hardest things that occurs. It doesn't allow us to have compassion for ourselves. And heartfelt listening brings us to that because we're listening with an open heart. If I'm feeling apart with someone, I can listen with my heart. And we do that by listening in. We listen in by creating an open, safe space. We listen non-judgmentally. We take in what we see, hear, and feel and make room for that other person. Here's the quote. I got ahead of myself. Trauma comes from having no one to listen to you. no one to hear you. Trauma, according to Mate, is not the event or the occurrence. It is the fact that we haven't had someone to listen to us, and we haven't been able to process what happened. And when that happens in a family, it's powerfully it impacts the family in a very significant way. I know and have worked with families over many years. 25 years I worked with teenagers and children and their parents, and did a lot of family counseling and family meetings. And it's the opening up of the listening that makes the change. I've got multiple stories at the top of my tongue. A child and a parent who just were at loggerheads, and in talking to the child, realized that they just hadn't had a chance to tell their parent what they really needed to say. So we bring them in, and they get to say it, and the parent gets to hear it, and they get to have a conversation. That's what we do naturally. That's what we do skillfully when we open our heart to listening with our heart. And what it does is it creates a safe place. If you look at the tenets of psychological safety, which come from Amy Edmonton, it makes a space to give and receive feedback, to raise issues, to disagree, clarify, find solutions, admit our errors. All this stuff is running in the background all the time. And often in families, we don't take the time to catch up with each other. Something happens and it goes under the rug, or it's lost, or we didn't have time to talk about it. And then we get to the next weekend, and all of a sudden there's distance between us and another person. And we haven't had the time, or we've taken the time, or made the space for the listening. And we as parents need that listening as much as our kids do. And then lastly, we'll look at one of the group resilience skills, which we call collaborating skills. And in this case, it's about agreements. One of the most biggest difficulties in companies, organizations, consulting that I do with healthcare clinics, families, others, is missing agreements. And so seeking agreements, looking for where there are missing agreements, are powerful ways of making things right. For a long time, I had this disagreement with my wife because I would say I would take the trash out, and she would get upset, and she would start giving me, nagging at me about not taking the trash out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I told you I would take the trash out. But what we had missed was I hadn't told her when I would take the trash out. So when I finally realized that, and then I could start saying, I'll take the trash out and I'll have it out by 8 p.m. So, it's well after dark. She's waiting for the trash to go out before. Anyway, you get the idea. A missing agreement. So seeking agreements, getting on the same page, same chapter, same book is such a big thing. What are the explicit agreements that we need and can have together? What are the assumed agreements? And how can we seek and name those agreements? And what's missing? What's missing between you and your son or your daughter? What's missing between them? What's missing between us and our partners? There's so many things that go by the way that we haven't put together as an agreement. So to finish up, let's just bring this back to presencing. Resilience is about presencing. It's presencing the precious moments. It's also presencing what I call the precious pain, being present with our children, our partners. This is the stuff that drives families apart. When a teenager isn't listened to, and they're not they don't feel that they're being honored for what they're going through. They don't want to have anything to do with their parent. And this is where the myth that teenagers are difficult comes from. Uh, I worked with teenagers for years and years and years and years. And the one thing they all wanted was to have a better relationship with their parents. They want it so much and they need it so badly. And yes, of course they're gonna do some things to push away, but they always want to come back. We as adults, if we have a dissonance with a parent, we feel it the rest of our lives. This relationship is critical and it's important. So presencing those precious moments is as important as the good moments. And when you bring it all down to the end point, resilience is really loving awareness. It's just bring ourselves to center so we can truly take in the wholeness of our family and our children and what they're going through, and bringing our own loving awareness to them, to ourselves, and to our family together. So this is, we're about to close out on this webinar. Thank you for your patience. You can reach me directly at chuck@dovetaillearning.org. We have a ton of free downloads. We have circles and trainings and many webinars, and the webinars are all up on our website. You can go back through back webinars and have specific ones on cultural patterns or any of the skills. For families, we have materials that can be purchased. We have a guidebook called Practical Skills for a More Resilient Family. It gives you all the skills in an easy to see format. And then a workbook with over 80 activities that families can use to explore together some of these concepts in their resilience. So that brings us to a close. I thank you so much for being here from Dovetail Learning. I will send out the recording and some resources for you, and wish you great resilience in your work with families, in your own family, and in your relationships with your family members.